All right, I want to wrap up intelligence with a very short video that will kind of foreshadow some stuff that we'll talk more about in class. But I want to talk just at least a little bit about how there are genetic influences in intelligence. So this data from Matt McGew, who's actually a researcher at the University of Minnesota, shows an indication of the heritability of intelligence. So this is how correlated are the intelligence scores, are the IQs of twins. And you remember from the method section, we talked about monozygotic and dizygotic twins. Monozygotic twins are identical. They share 100% of their DNA. Dizygotic twins are still twins. They're fraternal twins that are non-identical, and they are from two separate eggs, two separate sperm. They share only the amount of genetic material that a normal set of siblings would, so around 50%. So you can see from the differences here that there is a substantial heritable component to intelligence. If you notice there's higher correlation between monozygotic than dizygotic twins, then you can infer that uh, whatever you're measuring is due in part, at least, to a genetic component. So this is a very strong correlation here between the monozygotic identical twin scores. And you can also see that this tends to expand as you go through life, particularly once you hit adulthood. This is an even bigger difference, indicating that the heritable component of intelligence matters even more later in life than it does earlier in life. So, substantial genetic component to intelligence. But does this mean that intelligence is all about genes? No, of course not. It is a very heritable thing, but the environment matters a whole lot as well. There's a lot of evidence that the cultural environment and certainly the like immediate social and financial environment people live in matter a whole lot for intelligence. So heritability, if we look at that over time, that remains constant. Like if you do studies on this in the 60s compared to now, the heritability differences are uh, consistent. But like I mentioned earlier, IQ scores tend to rise. We are as a group getting smarter. So IQs have to be, or IQ tests and scores have to be kind of readjusted, restandardized, rewritten every couple decades. So if we did nothing, IQ scores would seem to raise 9 to 15 points about every 30 years, and that's maybe even speeding up. Partly because as a species in the last several decades, we all travel more, we have much, much more access to information, and we use technology much more, which has to do with that increased access to information, right? So all that exposure, all that practice with engaging with information and new things is probably contributing to our rise in intelligence and IQ. It's also really important to note another one of these sort of gene environment interactions that the heritability for intelligence is higher for people higher in socioeconomic status. So there's a very strong, heritability for more wealthy people or people that are more well off financially, around zero point 0.8. And there's a relatively low heritability coefficient for people that are less well off, only around zero point 0.2. So what this suggests is that you need a fostering environment for that heritability to express itself, for genes to express themselves in people's intelligence. Not having resources, not having a stable environment, not having proper nutrition, all of these sorts of things probably limit the extent to which people's genes can express themselves in intelligence, basically. So not having um, the types of privileges that some people have is going to limit how much their intelligence is able to come out, basically. So genes matter, but the environment matters in order to allow those genes to be expressed. Disparities in wealth and poverty are enormous determinants of people's ability to express their intelligence as well. So genes and environment certainly both matter, but genes seem to matter more in a healthy, safe, and supportive environment. So just to kind of wrap up in intelligence, intelligence has been thought of in many, many different ways. It seems to have some general type of component, that G that Spearman talked about. Um, and there are different ways to define it too. Usually something about being adaptive and dealing with intellectual demands. But there are lots and lots of different ways you can think about intelligence, none of which are, necessarily totally wrong. But it's good to think about them as sharing some sort of common reservoir of intelligence, basically, even though, some tasks are going to draw on certain aspects of intelligence more than others. And intelligence is certainly heritable, but it's one of those things where, is it nature and nurture? Well, of course, it's both. That nature, the genetic component of it, biological component, is going to kind of open the door for possibilities or kind of presage how intelligent someone's going to be. But without proper support with your safety and financial environment, those genes are not going to be able to, lead to that expression of those genes. So environmental effects really, really matter for kind of conditioning how much genes are going to be able to be expressed. All right.